So one of the things that makes asexuality different from other sexualities is that a lot of times people on the ace spectrum will expand their identity to also include a label for their romantic attraction. And this is something that doesn't really happen in other sexualities because a lot of people kind of match up their sexuality and their romantic attraction. And so it kind of, it fits for both. You know, if you're heterosexual, you're probably heteroromantic. If you're bisexual, you're probably biromantic. You know, that's kind of how it works for most people. Now, if you're in those types of sexualities, you may not have a matching romantic attraction. That's totally normal as well. But if you're asexual, there's a higher probability that you're not going to be aro ace right off the bat. You might be something a little bit different. And so today I wanted to touch on romantic attraction and the different types of romantic attraction in the asexual spectrum. So really quick, I'm on Wikipedia. Let's talk about what is the definition of romantic attraction, because it's a little bit obscure and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially if you've never experienced it or you haven't been in a romantic relationship before, or sometimes even if you have. Romantic attraction is an emotional response that results in a desire for a romantic relationship with the recipient. Now, I'm not really going to touch on what a romantic relationship looks like because I think it's very subjective and that's different for every person. A lot of times romantic relationships mean sex. That doesn't have to be true. I know a lot of relationships that are romantic that don't include sex. I think for me personally, my view of romance is kind of like, it's somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with, you want to be with all the time, for the most part. Maybe you want to get close to them physically in some way. It doesn't have to be sex. It could be cuddling. It could just be being close to them in close proximity. And it's kind of like the person like you die for, you're ride or die, your person, you know? And we could get into a whole different conversation about like romance versus platonic relationships and all that jazz. But that's kind of how I view romantic attraction. If I wanted to be in a romantic relationship with somebody, those are the things I would be looking for and interested in. So as an ace person, your romantic attraction doesn't necessarily have to match up with your asexuality. And so there are a number of different types of romantic attraction. Obviously, there's the normal ones like heteroromantic, homoromantic, biromantic, panromantic, whatever, even aromantic. Now, there's also other ones that are a little bit more similar to the asexualities that I talked about in my sexual attraction video. Things like demiromantic and grayromantic. Personally, for me right now, I am labeling myself as a grayromantic asexual person. In the past, I have identified as a heteroromantic person. I've questioned a lot if I'm a biromantic person, and that's kind of my experience with romantic attraction. Let's start by talking about aromantic. Aromantic is basically you have little to no romantic attraction to anybody of any gender. And so this basically means that you don't really see yourself in a relationship with anybody. There are aro ace people who are in relationships, but you just don't have that attraction to be in a romantic relationship. The next one is demiromantic, and I talked a little bit about demisexuality in my sexual attraction video if you wanted to check that out. But the demi term basically means that you're not really attracted to anybody until you form like a serious emotional connection with somebody, until you really get to know somebody. And it's easy to say that everybody is demi because isn't everybody like looking for that or like emotional connection to like have sex with them or to be in a romantic relationship with them? And that's not how demi works, you know? For demiromantic people, it is very specific to the person. And so you're not going to be in a romantic relationship. You're not going to want to be in a romantic relationship with everybody. I think that's an important distinction to make with sexualities and attractions, is just because you have a certain attraction or you don't have a certain attraction doesn't mean that you can't be in a relationship, and it doesn't mean that you don't want sex or a relationship. You know, you can be a demiromantic person and be in a relationship with a straight person and like have sex with them or whatever, you know? There's a lot of different nuances to asexuality that a lot of people don't realize. But that's kind of what demiromantic means. It means you really have to form a connection before you are interested or you see yourself in a romantic relationship with somebody. The last one, and again, I touched on the gray umbrella term in my sexual attraction video, but the gray romantic is kind of where I'm at right now. I see it as a big like umbrella type of term. Obviously the idea of gray is in between black and white, and it's a little bit more, it's a gray area, you know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's kind of obscure and vague and blurry. And some people have a more concrete definition, I think, for gray. But for me, I use the gray romantic term because for me, I think I could potentially see myself being romantically attracted to somebody. I just don't really know who, and I don't really know in what context. I'm not really sure. And I think it's also for me right now, I'm using it as a bridge between heteroromantic and aromantic, because I think I'm a little bit too scared to say that I'm actually aromantic. I could be. I'm not really sure though. I'm still figuring things out. So gray is like a really good umbrella term for questioning people, because we're like, well, I don't really want to label myself yet. I'm not really sure. But, you know, like I said, some people label themselves and that's that, and they're confident in it. In conclusion, your romantic attraction doesn't have to match up with your sexual attraction. And this can be true for any sexuality, not just asexuality. But if you're trying to question your asexuality and you're figuring things out, know that they don't have to match up. I know mine didn't really match up at the beginning, and now it might match up a little bit more, but it's hard to pin down. It's hard to know. So don't freak out and talk to people. That's a really great tip that I constantly bring up. If you're questioning, if you don't really know, find somebody to talk to, find somebody to answer your questions, read books, read about it, figure things out, and know that you may never have an answer, but hopefully you can understand romantic attraction a little bit better now.